There's a moment almost everyone eventually reaches, usually later than they'd like, where the truth finally lands. No one is coming to rescue you. Nobody is going to show up tomorrow morning and build your discipline for you. Nobody is going to carry the weight of your own life on their back while you watch from the sidelines. That realization stings the first time it hits, but it's also the exact place where real change actually starts. Because the growth that matters most doesn't happen while people are cheering you on. It doesn't happen on the easy stretch of road, or in the moments when everyone around you understands exactly what you're trying to build. It happens in the quiet, alone with your own doubts, moving forward anyway, with no guarantee waiting on the other side, and no crowd watching to make it feel worthwhile. Just something inside you insisting there's more, and a decision to keep walking toward it anyway. The person who learns to stand on their own 2 feet, without needing a chorus of support to keep moving, becomes remarkably hard to knock down later. Think about how a tree actually gets strong. It isn't the sheltered ones, protected from every gust of wind, that end up with the deepest roots. It's the ones that spent seasons getting hammered by storms nobody protected them from. Every rough season forces the roots further into the ground. People aren't built any differently. The hard stretches, the disappointments, the nights spent doubting yourself, the people who walked away, the moments nobody believed you'd pull it off, those aren't just obstacles in your way. They're the exact conditions that build the roots you'll eventually stand on. Changing the question. Somewhere along the way, I learned something that quietly rearranged how I think about difficulty. Your whole trajectory shifts the day you stop asking, why is this happening to me, and start asking, what is this trying to teach me instead? Every hard stretch is carrying some kind of lesson inside it, whether you're ready to receive it or not. And every painful chapter has the raw material to become a foundation later, if you're willing to stay in it long enough to find out what it's offering. Most people never discover what they're actually capable of, because the second things get uncomfortable, they run toward comfort, toward approval, toward the version of the path that doesn't ask anything difficult of them. And then, years later, they wonder quietly why nothing about their life ever became extraordinary. Comfort's favorite whisper hears something worth naming directly. Comfort might be the single biggest obstacle standing between you and the person you're capable of becoming. It doesn't announce itself as an enemy. It never does. It just whispers, stay right where you are. You're fine as you are. You don't really need to change anything. Wait until tomorrow to deal with it. And tomorrow, quietly, becomes next week. Next week becomes next year. One day, without ever noticing the exact moment it happened, you look up and realize you spent years defending yourself against the very challenges that would have made you stronger. The version of you that you actually want to become is sitting on the far side of your discipline. Not your motivation, not some burst of temporary excitement. Motivation is unreliable by nature. Some mornings it shows up loud and obvious. Other mornings you wake up exhausted, doubting everything, feeling nothing close to inspired. Discipline doesn't care which morning it is. Discipline simply says, I made a commitment, and I intend to honor it regardless of how I feel about it today. The relationship that decides everything else, every promise you keep to yourself, adds a small brick to your own confidence. Every promise you quietly break chips away at your trust in your own word, and the relationship you have with yourself, more than any other relationship in your life, ends up determining how everything else feels. You can have money and still feel hollow. You can have an audience and still feel completely alone. You can look successful by every external measure and privately know that somewhere along the way, you abandoned yourself to get there. The first person you owe real loyalty to isn't anyone external. It's the future version of yourself, the person being built piece by piece out of what you do today. Try this for a second. Picture yourself 5 years from now, standing directly in front of you. What would that person say? Would they thank you for getting up on the mornings you didn't feel like it? Would they thank you for choosing to learn instead of coast, for refusing to quit when quitting would have been so easy to justify? Or would they ask why you let so much potential sit unused? That question carries real weight, because every choice you make today is quietly having a conversation with the person you're going to become. Why the compound effect matters more than the big moment people. Love the idea that success arrives in one dramatic instant. The perfect opportunity. The lucky phone call. The one moment that changes everything. That's rarely how it actually plays out. Real progress is usually invisible while it's happening. It's the extra hour spent learning something nobody's grading you on. It's the workout finished with no one there to clap. It's the money quietly set aside that nobody else knows about. It's choosing to improve, while everyone around you is scrolling through a distraction. Small choices compound into large outcomes. A shift of a single degree in direction looks meaningless today, but stretched across years, it lands you somewhere completely different than where you were originally headed. Someone who improves by a small, almost invisible margin every day becomes, over enough time, unrecognizable compared to where they started. Not because of one massive leap, but because of thousands of small, repeated actions nobody was there to witness. Your routine is your future. Already written, your life doesn't get shaped by what you do occasionally. It gets shaped by what you repeat. Look honestly at your daily habits, and you're looking directly at the direction your life is already heading, whether you meant to point it there or not. Every habit functions like a vote for the person you're in the process of becoming. Every choice, every small sacrifice, every hour spent one way instead of another, it all accumulates into the identity you eventually settle into. You don't become disciplined by waiting around for the feeling of discipline to arrive first. You become disciplined by practicing it, especially on the days it feels completely unnatural. You don't become confident by waiting to feel confident. You become confident by doing something difficult, surviving it, and quietly filing that away as proof you can handle more than you assumed. Confidence isn't something you stumble into. It's something you construct, one piece of evidence at a time. Evidence that you can trust your own word. Evidence that you can push through resistance. Evidence that you keep moving even when everything about the moment says stop. Wanting the reward without the process, a lot of people want the outcome without ever agreeing to the process that produces it. They want strength without the years of strain that build it. They want the confident version of themselves to just show up one day, fully formed, without the uncomfortable repetitions that actually manufacture confidence. Life doesn't really negotiate on this point. If you want the view from the mountain, you have to accept the climb that gets you there. Every unglamorous, unphotographed step of it. Becoming better rarely feels comfortable while it's happening. Growth asks you to leave old versions of yourself behind, and sometimes the hardest goodbye isn't to a person or a place. It's to the version of you that made excuses, blamed circumstances, waited for permission, needed everyone else's approval before finally taking a step. A seed has to split open before anything resembling a tree can grow out of it. You have to be willing to outgrow the identity that got you here, because that identity was never going to be the one capable of building what comes next. Why the solitary stretch matters. This is exactly why walking a stretch of the road alone carries so much weight. Not because solitude is superior to connection, and not because the people around you don't matter, but there are seasons in a life that genuinely require quiet, space to actually think, room to rebuild, distance from the noise long enough to finally hear your own voice clearly again, instead of the layered opinions of everyone who's ever weighed in on your decisions. The world is loud, and everyone has an opinion about what you should be doing with your one life. Very few of those people are actually walking your specific road with you, feeling what you feel, carrying what you're carrying. So at some point, you have to learn to trust your own commitment even when nobody else fully understands what you're building. History is full of people who were misunderstood for long stretches of their journey, mocked for their ambitions, questioned at every turn, told plainly that they were wasting their time. They kept going anyway, not because they had proof it would work out, but because they had a conviction strong enough to survive without it. The part nobody sees. The world tends to notice the finished result and skip over everything that produced it. People see the person standing confidently on the stage. They don't see the thousands of unglamorous hours spent practicing in a room with no audience. They see the win. They rarely see the string of losses that came before it, or the number of times quitting would have been the far easier option. Nearly every success story worth telling has a hidden chapter buried underneath it. Rejection, failure, the specific moments where walking away felt like the obviously reasonable choice. Somewhere in that chapter, a decision got made that changed the trajectory of everything after it. The decision that temporary discomfort was a far better trade than permanent regret. Sit with that distinction for a second, because it matters more than it sounds like it should. Pain that comes from discipline, sacrifice, or saying no to a distraction, that pain is real, but it's finite. It hurts today and starts fading almost immediately. Regret doesn't work that way. Regret has no expiration date. It doesn't ease with time the way ordinary pain does. If anything, it tends to grow heavier the longer it sits untouched, because failure at least teaches you something concrete, while regret mostly just haunts you with a question you'll never get to answer. Failure means you tried and it didn't work. Regret means you never let yourself find out. Choose your pain deliberately. Choose the kind that builds something, not the kind that just accumulates silently in the background of your life. Two people, one storm bips. The same difficulty can land on two different people and produce two entirely different futures, depending entirely on what each person decides it means. One person looks at a setback and sees a wall. Another looks at the identical setback and sees a challenge worth solving. One asks why this happened to them specifically. The other asks what there is to learn from it. The event itself rarely controls the outcome nearly as much as your interpretation of the event does. Your mindset shapes the meaning you assign to what happens, and that meaning shapes every action that follows it. An untrained mind, left on autopilot, will almost always default toward comfort, toward excuses, toward the fastest route away from discomfort. A trained mind understands something different. That difficulty is precisely where real capability gets built, not around. Your mind works a lot like a muscle in this respect. Whatever you exercise regularly gets stronger, whether you intend for it to or not. Practice fear consistently, and fear gets stronger. Practice doubt, and doubt strengthens. Practice discipline, deliberately, even in small doses, and discipline becomes the thing that shows up automatically when you need it. Every single day, you're training something, whether you're paying attention to it or not. The real question worth asking is what exactly you're reinforcing. Are you training yourself to fold the first time something gets uncomfortable, or to keep moving through it? Are you training yourself to look for someone to hand the problem to, or to become the kind of person capable of solving it yourself? One of the quietest, most underrated freedoms available to a person is becoming someone they can actually depend on. Someone who doesn't collapse the second circumstances turn difficult, who doesn't require constant outside validation to keep functioning, who can stand in genuine uncertainty and calmly say, "I'll figure this out." Preparation disguised as punishment. That kind of person doesn't appear from nowhere. They get built, gradually, through a long accumulation of choosing growth over comfort, in moments nobody else was watching. And eventually, looking back, the lonely stretches of the road stop looking like punishment and start looking like exactly what they were the whole time: preparation. Because solitude does something comfort never manages to do. It introduces you to yourself, directly, without the usual noise and distraction cushioning the encounter. That introduction might be one of the more valuable things a person ever experiences. Genuinely understanding what you're capable of, uncovering the strength that had been sitting underneath years of excuses and hesitation the entire time. Most people spend the majority of their life surrounded by noise and never actually meet themselves. They never sit still long enough to ask the deeper questions. Who am I actually becoming? What am I building, brick by brick, whether I notice it or not? What am I willing to give up for it? Who am I when nobody at all is watching? Those questions carry weight precisely because your honest answers to them quietly determine everything about the direction your life ends up taking. Extraordinary is built, not discovered. Extraordinary lives don't happen by accident. They get constructed by ordinary people who repeat extraordinary decisions consistently, long past the point where it stops feeling exciting. Nobody wakes up suddenly disciplined out of nowhere. Discipline gets built one decision at a time, one uncomfortable morning at a time, one kept promise at a time. Whoever you currently admire for what they've built once stood exactly where you're standing, fighting the same doubts, the same fear, the same pull towards stopping early. What set them apart wasn't the absence of those feelings, it was that they developed the specific ability to keep going anyway. Continuing, plainly, is close to a superpower, because most people don't fail from a lack of raw talent. They fail because they stopped too early, often right before the exact chapter where everything was about to turn. Think about how a farmer actually operates. Nobody plants a seed and digs it back up the next morning, simply because no tree is visible yet. There's an entire season where nothing appears to be happening above the surface, even while roots are quietly forming underneath it. Your own growth follows the same hidden timeline. There will be long stretches where it feels like nothing is changing, even while you're learning, adjusting, and laying a foundation you can't see the shape of yet. The mistake most people make is confusing invisible progress with no progress at all. Something is almost always happening beneath the surface, even during the seasons that look completely still from the outside. No shortcut around becoming pulleys. People generally want the harvest without much interest in the planting season that made it possible. They want the finished success story without sitting through the quiet years that built it. They want the confidence without the uncomfortable process that manufactures it in the first place. But there isn't a workaround for actually becoming something. You can't fake your way into real discipline, and you can't borrow someone else's mindset and expect it to hold under pressure the way something you built yourself would. Nobody else can lift the weight for you and hand you the resulting strength. Nobody can sit the exam for you and transfer over the knowledge. Someone can point you in a useful direction, teach you a piece of the process, cheer you along the way, but nobody can actually become you. That part stays entirely yours, and it's less of a burden than it sounds like, because it also means the direction of your life is genuinely in your hands. Responsibility as leverage, not blame. Something shifts the moment you fully accept responsibility for your own life. Responsibility hands you back control. Blame does the opposite. It quietly transfers your power somewhere else. Blame your past, and you hand your past permanent authority over your future. Blame other people, and you let their behavior determine your emotional state indefinitely. Blame your circumstances, and you talk yourself into believing you never had any real influence to begin with. The person who decides plainly that their life is their own responsibility stops waiting around for rescue and starts building instead. They stop asking who's going to save them and start asking what they can actually do next. What skill needs developing, what habit needs adjusting, what weakness deserves direct attention. That single shift in questioning separates people who create their own outcomes from people who stay stuck waiting for outcomes to happen to them. None of this means life suddenly becomes easy the moment you accept responsibility for it. Storms still show up, people still disappoint you, plans still fall apart at inconvenient times. What actually changes is internal. You become sturdier than whatever circumstance is currently pressing against you. You stop being fully at the mercy of every situation and start being the one who controls how you respond to it. And your response, far more than the situation itself, is usually what shapes what comes next. Two people can lose an identical opportunity. One decides it's over. The other decides it's forcing them towards something better they hadn't considered yet. The difference rarely lives in the situation itself. It lives in the meaning each person assigns to it. Becoming more, not just gaining more real success, was never only about accumulating more. More money, more recognition, more possessions. At its core, it's about becoming more disciplined, more patient, more focused, more capable of handling weight you couldn't have carried before. Plenty of people chase the outward markers of success while quietly avoiding the personal growth required to sustain it. They want a bigger life while keeping the exact same mindset that built their current limitations. They want different results while repeating the same habits that produce the results they already have. But a genuinely different future requires a genuinely different version of you carrying it. The person who eventually lives that upgraded life can't be the identical person who built the current ceiling. The thinking has to shift. The standards have to rise. The habits and daily actions have to actually change. Because your life, at the end of the day, is simply a reflection of what you repeatedly choose to do. Look honestly at your calendar. Look at where your energy actually goes on an average, unremarkable day. That's where your future is quietly being built, brick by brick, not in your intentions, not in the version of the plan that only exists in your head, but in your actions, repeated often enough to matter. Character is built where nobody's watching you. Your challenges were never really there to diminish you. They're there to reveal what was already inside you, assuming you're willing to stay inside the process long enough to find out. You have to be willing to keep working when nobody understands what you're doing yet. Willing to put in hours nobody applauds. Willing to believe in the outcome before you have any solid proof it's coming. That's precisely where character gets built. In private, when there's no audience checking your progress, no one praising the effort, no one who would even notice if you quietly gave up. Who you become in those unwatched moments is what eventually shapes who you appear to be in public. Plenty of people are more interested in looking successful than in actually becoming it. But real substance gets built through what happens when the cameras, metaphorically speaking, are off. The hours quietly invested, the knowledge slowly gained, the discipline steadily developed, the temptations turned down one at a time, the excuses dismantled before they can take root. Every time you choose the harder right answer over the easier wrong one, you're reinforcing something inside yourself. Every time you follow through on exactly what you said you'd do, you're adding another layer to your own self-respect. And self-respect, more than almost anything else, is the actual foundation underneath a genuinely powerful life. Once you've built real self-respect, you stop negotiating with your own weaknesses. You stop letting a passing emotion make permanent decisions on your behalf. "I'll start tomorrow" quietly gets replaced with, "I'm starting now." And there's a specific kind of power available in that exact moment. The moment you finally decide you're done living beneath what you're actually capable of. The road less crowded ever. Every person eventually reaches a fork. Stay the same or transform. Stay comfortable or grow. Follow whatever the crowd is doing, or build a path that's actually your own. The road toward growth is rarely crowded, because most people, understandably, choose comfort. Most choose the familiar option. Most choose whatever feels safest in the moment. That's exactly why the people who choose growth instead end up rare. They're willing to do what most people quietly refuse to do. Willing to give up what most people are busy protecting. Willing to walk through long stretches of uncertainty without demanding guarantees first. They understand something most people never fully absorb. Who you become during the process matters more, in the end, than whatever destination you were originally aiming for. As you start actually building yourself, training your mind, adjusting your habits, raising your own standards, something noticeable begins happening internally. You stop looking for someone else to complete what's missing in you, and you start becoming someone you're genuinely glad to spend your own time with. That shift is one of the more powerful moments available in a person's life, because the most important relationship you will ever build is the one you have with yourself. If you can't sit with your own company, if you can't trust your own word, if you can't believe honestly in your own ability to follow through, no amount of outside achievement is ever going to fill that particular gap. You can collect accomplishments, possessions, recognition, all of it, And if the internal foundation was never actually built, everything sitting on top of it will keep feeling slightly hollow no matter how much you pile on. The people who don't break Spogger, the people who seem unshakable, were rarely spared from struggle. They're not strong because difficulty skipped over them. They're strong because they learned how to look directly at themselves in the middle of that difficulty instead of looking away. They learned to face their own weaknesses honestly instead of running from them, to admit clearly when they were wrong, to improve without needing to be forced into it by outside pressure. That's what real maturity actually looks like. That's what building yourself in practice actually involves. There's a version of you right now that exists only as potential. Steadier, wiser, more disciplined. Someone who wakes up without negotiating, who keeps promises automatically, who manages emotions instead of being managed by them, who doesn't need a constant stream of outside approval to keep moving forward. That version doesn't show up by accident. It gets constructed choice by choice, sacrifice by sacrifice, decision by ordinary decision. People consistently underestimate how much weight a single decision can carry. But almost every real transformation traces back to one specific moment. Someone decides to stop making excuses, decides to finally take their health seriously, decides to learn the skill they've been putting off, decides to walk away from an environment that's quietly been working against their future. That single decision becomes the first brick of an entirely different structure. Roots before trees building. You don't build a meaningful life in a single day. You build it one brick at a time. And the hardest part is usually patience. Most people grow impatient with exactly the process that would have gotten them there. Wanting to see the finished building while they're still laying the foundation. Wanting immediate proof, immediate results, immediate reward. But the things actually worth having are almost always built slowly. A strong body comes from thousands of repeated workouts. A sharp mind comes from thousands of repeated deliberate thoughts. A meaningful career comes from thousands of accumulated hours nobody was tracking closely. Strong character comes from thousands of small choices, most of them made when nobody else was in the room. Invisible effort reliably comes before visible reward. Remember that, especially in the stretch where nobody seems to notice what you're doing, because roots grow underground long before anything rises visibly above it. Your progress doesn't need spectators to count as real. Your commitment doesn't require applause to matter. Some of the most important work you'll ever do will happen quietly, completely unseen. Reading the book nobody's watching you read, practicing the skill nobody's grading, fighting the old habit nobody else even knows you're wrestling with, choosing discipline over comfort in a moment nobody will ever hear about. You see it happening, though, and more importantly, you're the one actually becoming it, one repeated choice at a time. What your ordinary day is hiding, small, repeated actions accumulate into outcomes that look, from a distance, almost impossible to explain any other way. Saving a little consistently builds financial discipline. Learning something small every day builds real knowledge over time. Showing up for the same workout repeatedly builds physical strength that didn't exist before. Managing your own reactions consistently builds a kind of emotional steadiness most people never develop. This is simply how accumulation works. The version of you that exists a year from now is already being shaped, quietly, by whatever you're repeating today. Your future was never going to be decided by one enormous dramatic moment. It gets decided in the ordinary, forgettable days. The ones where nothing feels particularly significant, where no one's forcing your hand, where the excitement of a new goal has long since worn off, and all that's left is the actual, unglamorous choice in front of you. Anyone can push hard for a single day. Anyone can feel motivated for a week. Anyone can make a big promise while their emotions are running high. The real test shows up later. Who you are once the excitement fades, once the results are slower than you hoped, once nobody's around to witness whether you kept going or quietly stopped. The world isn't short on people who start something new. It's short on people who actually finish, who stay committed long after the initial spark burns off, who keep walking the stretch of road nobody else is walking with them, because they already understand that the walking itself is what's building them into someone capable of whatever waits at the end of it.